let's talk about being new. Howard, me and you were new players so long ago, it feels like we've always been in this hobby.
I started in 1982.
Do you feel like you could go back to that time and like give us a taste of what it was like for Howard to be a new person in the world of role-playing games and maybe nerdinity in general during the 80s?
There are two ways to look at that. My first game, my father saw the game in a store and he was looking for something to engage me, my brother, and at the time we had two stepbrothers with the wife he had at that time. He gets around. Anyway, so when Dad comes in, is like, this is what we're doing tonight. There's no, how is he going to attract new players to the table? Do I want to do this? Dad said to, and at the time, I was still 6 years old because that was before my 7th birthday. So yeah, that was just, you just did it because Dad said to, but I was immediately engaged. My father was a salesman at the time, and he's a great storyteller. He's good at getting an audience's attention and getting you enraptured in it. And his stories are fantastic. He did voices, he did sound effects, and then he'd go, and what do you do? And we'd be like, and scrambling. And it was a fun challenge, and we got really into it. We didn't have metal miniatures, the 25 millimeter scale minis back then. They had just been released that summer. That's how I figured out what year it was. Is Masters of the Universe characters. He-Man was the fighter, and Beastman was the elf. So I was Man-at-Arms. I was the thief because there's no thief in the Masters of the Universe. And it was great to get us that way. But in a normal situation, like when I wanted to play with other people, I tried explaining this to other kids in elementary school. They didn't know what I was talking about. In middle school, I learned that there was a satanic panic, so you couldn't talk about what you were doing. People were freaked out. They thought it was evil. It wasn't until high school that I actually met other kids that played. And then it was my character's level this, and mine's this. And I found out that D&D had a second edition. Like, what? And so I was way behind. And I no longer knew what I was talking about, and I had to start over. And my brother opened a comic book store, and then he put me in charge of running games for newer players, which the upside there is the store was the draw. I didn't have to go find them, but when they arrived, I tried to make the games cater to what they wanted to play. And I would ask them, I was like, what are you interested in doing? You know, what is your character concept? And one of Corey's famous early concepts was a kobold named Kador. And he wanted the power to explode, to a misunderstanding of how rules worked, and also my brother being a jerk. So I gave him an aura of force that allowed him to explode. I started letting homebrew in as long as I could manage it and make it fun for everyone. And I had to actually make Corey's character slightly more powerful because there were people picking on him because he was one of the smaller guys there. Then I was like, but if you pick on the kobold, you could die, because upon his death, that aura of force will explode one last time. It's a D100 or something like that. I don't really have the rules handy anymore. It's been a few decades.
I started back then too, not 1982, but then again, I'm younger than Howard, and my first taste, of course, was with family and trying to rope the few friends I had into trying to play the game. And of course, I was the game master since I was the one who got the books. There was a really cool store called the Dungeon Book and Comic Store that I would go and get these books at, and they had a really cool ad.
When you were young and a knight in shining armor, leading armies, winning battles, saving kingdoms and nations, the only Earthman to save the world from alien invaders. You can fly next to Superman, stand shoulder to shoulder with the Wolverine and the Punisher. You and Batman slug it out with the bad guys and make the city a nice place to live. You defeated the evil wizards by throwing your spells back at him. You conquered your enemies to win a world. Your greatest work fulfilled. You always won despite the odds. The wonder of it all can be truly in at the dungeon.
And then,
I love the dungeon. The dungeon was great.
And then later on, I found the comic store that Howard worked at, called the Comic Storm, and I talked to them about these games, and they said that they have a whole clubhouse in the back that they run games in, and I joined Howard's game, and the rest is history. And I've always been kind of an outcast. When I was that age, I didn't have a lot of friends. In fact, once middle school hit, the few friends I had vanished. So playing Dungeons & Dragons at the Comic Storm was like a godsend for me, for who I was. And I made friends there, and a few of them have lasted to this day. Now we'll go to Matt, who started when he wasn't a child. And it probably has a way different experience, and I'd like to hear what his perspective on that is.
So my very, very, very first exposure to even understanding the concept of Dungeons & Dragons was that one episode in Dexter's Laboratory. Essentially, Dexter was a very power-hungry and slightly abusive dungeon master, and his friend group got tired of his shenanigans and replaced him with Dee Dee. And Dee Dee gave Dexter a pre-generated Hobbit character rather than the character that he wanted to be. And essentially, he wound up actually doing pretty well with that role, rather than being the god among men sort of player character. I still kind of remember seeing people in middle school and high school playing Magic the Gathering, and they were I didn't really associate myself with any large groups. When they played Magic the Gathering, they either wanted me to play Magic the Gathering, or they wanted to try to rope me into Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought, nah, that's not within my wheelhouse of interest whatsoever. It wasn't until actually about 10 years ago at this point where I joined unintentionally a group of players. I was hanging out with a guy also named Matthew at the time that I became really good friends with. We would have a lot of philosophical discussions, and we would also watch a lot of Vsauce. And he said, "Hey man, my friends are gonna be coming in to play a role playing game." And I thought, okay. And I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to lose the time I was doing hanging out with him. And I thought, okay, maybe I can join in and play a character, at least to just kind of fill in for the group. So it was a little daunting. I was trying to fit in. Essentially, I was trying to just essentially fit my character into the necessary role. He was like a hunter / archer, so I was essentially the long range damage dealer or sniper for the group, and a forest investigator, or just essentially a huntsman for the group. I brought food and whatnot. I just wanted to fill in the role. And
hey guys, I brought snacks. I'm one of you now.
I think that would work.
The blacksmith character, who was not a dwarf character. He got infected by a zombie that caused him to be paranoid. Part of me was kind of interpreting him as he was singling me out to get my character killed, because I had to take a few choice actions and phrases that either gave me an alibi or get my character killed, and I would have to create another character. At least the Dungeon Master and the rest of the group were kind enough to at least let me pull a mulligan. And they said, okay, let's rewind it and try again.
What you said about Dexter's Lab, I liked, because when me and Howard were kids, there wasn't a lot of doors that led to Dungeons & Dragons, right? if you were in a comic book store, you could see them on the shelf. For me, there were Fantasy Forest books, Choose Your Own Adventure books, that I read, and I was like, these are made by Dungeons and Dragons? I've heard of that before. I want to look into this. I think that's something I might want to do. But as time marched forward, right, we had niche cartoons that would do like Dungeons and Dragons episodes, and that when those people who watched those cartoons got a little older, they suddenly made Dungeons and Dragon episodes of like the Buffy the Vampire Dungeons and Dragon episode or the Community Dungeons and Dragons episode. And now we have, because live streams became very popular and people like watching those, we have like Harmon Quest, which I think is a great way to get somebody, if they don't understand it, Harmon Quest is a great and entertaining way. I would not suggest them watching
Critical
Role, because it's a very long and drawn out, kind of
campaign.
Yeah. Instead, like showing a small table group in front of a crowd that keeps the action going and has little animated bits, I think that's wonderful.